In the summer of 1227, one of the most powerful men who had ever lived died somewhere in the mountains of northern China. He had founded what would become the largest contiguous land empire the world has ever seen. And at his death, it already stretched from the Pacific coast to the Caspian Sea. Larger than Rome at its height, several times the size of the empire of Alexander the Great, and then he vanished. Not his empire, the man, his body. We know where Caesar fell. We can stand before the tomb of Tutankhamun. We can walk the hall in Paris where Napoleon lies beneath a dome of gold. But the founder of the largest land empire in human history, a man whose name still carries weight 8 centuries later, has no grave that anyone can find. And not for lack of looking. Satellites have swept the steppe. Expeditions have combed the mountains. One project recruited tens of thousands of volunteers to scan the landscape, image by image, looking for anything man-made. Nothing, because Genghis Khan did not lose his tomb. He hid it, deliberately, completely, so well that it has defeated 800 years and every tool the modern world can bring to bear. So the question is not where Genghis Khan is buried. The question is why a man who conquered the known world spent his death making certain the world would never find him. To understand why Genghis Khan erased his own grave, you have to understand where he began. Because he did not begin as a conqueror, he began as a boy with nothing. He was born Temujin around the year 1162 on the cold grasslands near the Onon River. His people were nomads, herders who lived and died by the seasons, by the horse, and by the blood feuds that ran between the tribes like cracks through ice. When Temujin was around 9 years old, his father was poisoned by a rival clan, and in the brutal arithmetic of the steppe, a widow and her young children were a burden no one wanted. Temujin's own clan abandoned the family, left them on the open plain to fend for themselves. They survived on roots, on fish, on whatever the land would give up, and in those years, something hardened in the boy. The secret history of the Mongols, the oldest account of his life written by his own people, records that, as a youth, Temujin killed his older half-brother in a dispute over food and standing, his own family. He was captured by a rival tribe and held as a prisoner, a wooden collar locked around his neck. He escaped, hiding through the night, then trusting a single sympathetic family to shelter him. He had learned the lesson early and never forgot it. Loyalty was rarer than gold, and betrayal was everywhere. This is the man the steppe made, not a king born to a throne, a survivor who trusted almost no one, and who would one day build an empire on exactly that principle. For 3 centuries, the tribes of the steppe had been at war with themselves. Mongols, Tatars, Karaites, Naimans, 1,000 small loyalties, none of them lasting. Every previous attempt to unite them had collapsed the moment its leader died. Temujin did something different, and it was not a weapon, it was an idea. In every other army of the age, you rose by birth. Noble blood commanded, common blood obeyed. Temujin threw that out. In his army, you rose by loyalty and skill and nothing else. A herdsman could command 1,000 men if he earned it. He promoted the sons of his enemies, and he executed the traitors who betrayed their own masters to him. Because a man who would betray one lord would betray another. He reorganized his people not by tribe, but by number. Squads of 10, companies of 100, regiments of 1,000. He deliberately mixed the old tribes together, so that a man's first loyalty was no longer to his clan, but to his unit, and through the unit, to Temujin himself. He broke the old world and rebuilt it around one man, and he built something no steppe army had ever had, a nervous system, a network of fast riders and relay stations that would grow into the legendary Mongol post, carrying information across the breadth of the empire faster than any enemy could react. In the year 1206, the tribes gathered and gave him a new title, Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. He was no longer Temujin the outcast. He was master of the steppe, and the steppe was only the beginning. What came next is almost difficult to comprehend. Genghis turned his unified nation outward, first against the kingdoms of northern China, then westward across Central Asia. And here, the story turns on a single catastrophic insult. To the west lay the Khwarezmian Empire, a vast and wealthy realm covering much of present-day Iran and Central Asia. Genghis did not at first want war with it. He wanted trade. He sent a caravan of merchants, hundreds of men, laden with silver and silk, to open commerce. The governor of the border city of Otrar accused them of being spies, and he had them all killed. Even then, Genghis did not immediately attack. He sent envoys to the Khwarezmian Shah to demand justice. The Shah's answer was to execute one of them and to send the others back humiliated, their beards burned away. It was, perhaps, the single worst decision any ruler ever made. What followed was not a war, it was an erasure. Genghis came with an army that moved like nothing the world had seen, columns coordinated across hundreds of miles, feigned retreats that lured armies to their destruction, and terror used deliberately as a tool. Cities that resisted were not merely defeated, they were unmade. Bukhara, Samarkand, Urgench, Nishapur, Merv, once among the largest cities on earth. We have to be careful here. The death tolls in the medieval chronicles are almost certainly exaggerated. A single city could not always lose the hundreds of thousands its enemies later claimed. But strip away the exaggeration, and what remains is still staggering. Entire civilizations broken in a matter of months. By the time Genghis turned home, his empire reached from the Pacific to the Caspian. He had become the most powerful man alive, and he was running out of time. In August of 1227, while campaigning in the mountains of northwestern China, Genghis Khan died. And here is the first mystery: we do not actually know how. The oldest Mongol account says he fell from his horse while hunting and never recovered. Other sources say illness, a fever that took him over weeks. Persian chroniclers offer still other versions. There is even a legend, almost certainly invented, involving a captured enemy princess. The truth is, the most powerful man in the world died, and his own people left no certain record of how. That was not an accident, it was the beginning of the secret. According to the accounts that survive, his death was concealed even from much of his own army. His body was carried home to the Mongol heartland in a funeral procession sworn to absolute silence. And the chroniclers tell us, and here we move firmly into the realm of legend, so treat it as such, that the escort killed every living soul they met on the road so that no one could report which way the body had gone. They tell us the grave was dug in secret, and that the men who built it were themselves killed to seal their silence. That a river was diverted to run over the burial site, that 1,000 horses were driven back and forth across the ground until no trace of digging remained. That trees were planted, and the forest left to swallow the place entirely. How much of that is true, we cannot know. The legends almost certainly grew in the telling. But here is the fact that no legend can explain away. Whatever they actually did, it worked. 800 years later, we still cannot find him. For 8 centuries, the tomb of Genghis Khan has been one of the great prizes of archaeology, and for 8 centuries it has refused to be found. The search has not been for lack of effort. Mongolian and Japanese teams have surveyed the likeliest valleys. In one of the most ambitious attempts, an American-led project recruited tens of thousands of online volunteers to examine high-resolution satellite images of the Mongolian landscape, flagging anything that looked man-made. They found archaeological sites, but not the one they were looking for. Most researchers believe the answer lies on or around a single sacred mountain, Burkhan Khaldun, in the Khenti Range. The mountain where, the sources say, the young Temujin once hid from his enemies, and which he later declared holy. It is the most likely resting place of the man who conquered the world. But there is a reason no one has dug there. To Mongolians, Burkhan Khaldun is sacred ground, and disturbing the grave of the founder of the nation is, for many, simply unthinkable. The mountain is now a protected World Heritage Site. The secrecy Genghis built into his death is now guarded by something he could never have planned for, the reverence of the people he left behind. And this is where the mystery opens into something larger, because it is not only Genghis who vanished. His sons, his grandsons, the great Khans who came after him, were laid to rest by the same secret rite in the same forbidden ground. An entire dynasty of the most powerful rulers on earth, deliberately erased from the map. It was not forgetfulness. It was a system, a culture that decided its greatest leaders belonged not to history, but to the land, returned to the earth and the silence, beyond the reach of grave robbers, of enemies, and of us. Genghis Khan conquered the largest empire the world has ever seen. And then, in death, he conquered the one thing every other conqueror lost to. He conquered history's need to find him. Perhaps that was the point all along. There always seems to be. More than we were told, subscribe and keep exploring the mind of Matt.